window in my house, and I looked out, and I saw a coyote, tongue hanging out, moving as fast as he could go, looked like he was chasing something, and he went around the south side of my house. I immediately looked up for some reason, and there was a harrier hawk circling around above where the coyote was. And maybe he was watching to see if the coyote scared something up so he could have a feast. Then I looked to my left, and I saw a doe crossing the street. She almost got hit by a car. And about 10 seconds later, here comes the buck. And he looked both ways, believe it or not. And then he crossed the street, and they went over and looked for some green grass, of which there's not much in my yard, because it's a desert. And they were all hunting food. And the thought ran through my mind, that's how some people act in this world. They're running after things, chasing things till they run out of breath. They're sitting up high, looking down and going to take advantage of somebody else's work. They're so anxious to get to food that they don't care what they're doing. And then there's somebody who's a little more careful. And then it wasn't a very pleasant thought. And then I had another thought. They're God's creation. And the coyote, even though he was, or she, I think it was a he, even though she was out of breath, he or she looked well fed, very sleek, a beautiful coat, nice tail, and then that eagle up above, circling, just gliding along like they didn't have a care in the world. And then two beautiful deer coming and not bothering anybody but doing anything. And I thought, now that's God's creation. And he made it for me to see that day, at that time, because it was purely accidental. I don't usually sit down after eating. And God provided that to give me a lesson on how to look at his creation. It's beautiful. And Paul tells us how we are to be content, is we are to think about things that are beautiful and honest and lovely and true and pure, and then to be content in everything we see. So I look occasionally for God's wisdom and what he wants to tell me at certain points in time. I like to take a little moment now and then and give him peace and quiet so that he can do what he wants to do. And I like to acknowledge it because it's an interesting thought. Who sits down and in less than 2 minutes sees two deer, beautiful deer, well fed, ears about that long it seemed, and a soaring bird, soaring like he was an eagle with eagle wings, and a beautiful coyote, not some of these scrappy looking things that we see once in a while. So here I am today again. I've got glasses to see with, I've got a microphone to talk through, and I've got ear plugs so that I can hear what's going on. So I'm sort of mechanically inclined today.
Mr. Tech.
Yeah. All I need is something to make me walk. But we don't have that yet. So let's go to the Father for a second, if we may, before I start. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, our Heavenly Father, the gentleman who provides everything for us, those things that are beautiful and pure, those things that make us stop and say, oh my, that's his creation. It's beautiful. We thank you that you have provided your word and given us pictures of what we should know and see and take example, look at it and think of it as examples and take knowledge from them. That's what Paul said. It's written so that we can see what happened in the past and we can learn from the past. There's also places in your book, sir, where there are beautiful things that we have a tendency to skip over. Help us to not skip over them, Father, because they are beautiful and they're for our benefit. And I thank you in your Son's precious name, Yeshua the Messiah. Amen. Before, once or twice, maybe once for sure, maybe twice possibly. And every time I've taught this particular thing, the ladies get upset. So we're going to start with a lady this morning in our reading, if that's okay.
Okay.
Oh, gee whiz, I forgot that. Sandy, please. Aye. You, Lord God, the universe, with your word. Adonai, our God, please make pleasant the words of your Torah in our mouths and in the mouths of your people, Israel. And may we and our descendants and the descendants of your people in the house of Israel all be perceivers of your name and students of your Torah for its own sake. Blessed are you, Adonai, who teaches Torah to his people, Israel, and everyone who's grafted in. Because we're part of Israel. Okay.
Numbers 30, verse 1. Moses.
If a man makes a vow, and he's obligated to do it. Period. And there's one other thing. That if he attempts to nullify his wife's vow or his daughter's vow, after he hears it, some period of time after he hears it, then he will suffer the consequences. But if he does it at the time he hears it, he protects his wife or his daughter if she has said something that is foolish. He protects her. There's another thought to it also, is the fact that the husband is the final ruler in the house. He's the one that's the head. He is given the obligation of protecting his wife or his daughter. It's not that he wants to take advantage of her or lord it over her, but he is to be a protector of her. And he is to do this with God's guidance so that he doesn't abuse the privilege of being the husband or the father. Does that make sense? Good. Now I'm going to ask a question. You started reading about Israel. And you're going to take vengeance on somebody. And you're going to vex somebody. Listen to what is being said and how it's being said. Because it's important. Okay, please. Sound like to you? Judgment? Is that exactly what the Lord said to do? I guess.
I was just noticing, from what I've seen, it's like God has promised us that he would never send a flood. However, then I look at all the things that are going on here and saying God is taking vengeance on these people and annihilating them, because of what they've been doing.
Okay. I have a question. The people who went, the soldiers who went out and killed all the men and brought back women and children and cattle and plunder, were they doing what the Lord told them to do?
That's like what Saul did.
If they did what the Lord told them to do, why was Moses mad?
I think he was mad because they saved the women that led them into sin.
I think that his thing was that they were supposed to destroy much more than what they did. Because Moses caused them to destroy much more.
Yes.
It also resembles Remember, he said, kill all the women who had intimate relations with men and the boys. Sounds like shades of Egypt when Pharaoh said, kill all the boys. Just a thought ran through my mind that here's Moses doing the same thing that Pharaoh did. If that wasn't what the Lord wanted, then Moses was stepping out. But I think that's what the Lord wanted. Why didn't the soldiers do what the Lord wanted? Maybe the heat of battle caused them not to do things? Who knows? I do know that when you go to battle, nothing ever happens the way you plan it. It's always different. Okay. And if you have any questions or anything, feel free. Or observations, even better. Okay. Next reader. This is one of the first times that Israel went to war with somebody that none of her members were killed. Thought being is the 603,550 fighting men that were in the first census. They were condemned to death to die in the wilderness, had all been killed by this time. And there was no one else out of that group that needed to be put to death. That portion of the Exodus is completely finished here. I think that's why the commanders were so excited or amazed that they decided to give the plunder that they had received to Moses to give to the Lord as a gift, because they recognized that he had protected them and that not a single man was lost. So the death that we have seen in the Exodus is now over. It is complete. And now we're going to find out that if somebody dies, it's because of themselves rather than that curse that was put on the Israelites for not going into the promised land. Speaking of promised land, I always thought that when you got to the promise, you had to cross the Jordan River to get to the promised land. And I think that's a mistake. Because I think back to Genesis, Genesis 15, verse 18, where it talks about the land that the Lord gave to Abram. It was from the Nile River to the great river, which was the Euphrates. And the Euphrates is on the east side of the Jordan River. And I've always thought that Gad and Reuben and half of the tribe of Manasseh thought that the east side of the Jordan was so much better than the promised land that they didn't want to go into the promised land. Come to find out that that portion of the east side of the Jordan was in fact part of the promised land that God promised Abram. So they were in the promised land even though they didn't cross the Jordan. And that might make interesting thoughts while we read about the tribe of Reuben and Gad.
Well, it says that land was more dedicated, if you want to say, was more advantageous for large quantities of animals.
Yes, that's what they saw. but it was still part of the promised land. And it was on the east side of the Jordan.
All the way across Iraq.
Pardon?
All the way across Iraq. Euphrates is on the.
All the way to the Euphrates River.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Now, I know that Moses was told where he walked. That was his land that was going to be given to him. If you talk about where Abraham walked, Abraham came from the city of Ur, which is close to the Euphrates River. And he walked a portion of the land east of the Jordan. And he walked some of the land west of the Jordan. And Caleb was told, where you walked, I will give you. Now, Caleb walked typically just on the west side of the Jordan, south of Israel, where Hebron is, and down towards the bottom of Israel. But he was given that land where he walked on. And when we talk about walking, we think about Ruth. And she took a shoe, and one of her relatives didn't want her, so she took a shoe and took his shoe, and he could not walk on that land that was hers ever again. He would never be able to claim it. If you walked on it, you could claim it. That's the way it worked in those days. So if you didn't have a shoe, you couldn't walk on it, so you couldn't claim it. Okay, let's hear about Reuben and Gad. One of the things that I've always thought about, or had thought about in the past, was the children of Gad and Reuben were conscientious objectors. Remember what they said? Don't make us cross the Jordan. Why didn't they want to go across the Jordan? We know that the land was much better for their lands, but they didn't want to cross the Jordan because they know that they would take them away from their home. I don't think they were conscientious objectors, but they did do something that irritated Moses. Up to this point in time, let's put it this way. Up to this point in time, the land that they wanted had been fought for by the children of Israel. In other words, their brethren had fought for it along with them. If they didn't cross the Jordan, they wouldn't help their brethren fight for their land. I think that might have been a little selfish to begin with. But Moses, when he talked about it, actually caused them to change their attitude ever so slightly. Well, maybe a bunch even, if you want to put it that way. Because then they made some vows. And up to this point in time, we've heard about vows a little bit. And vows are important in this section because there are some vows. They vowed that they wouldn't come back to their land until their brethren got their land. That's what they vowed. And apparently they come pretty close to satisfying that because they were allowed by Joshua to come back to their land. Okay, the rest of this is Moses telling them what the agreement will be, them agreeing to the agreement that they will, in fact, they go so far as to say, hey, we're going to be the front guard, we're going to be the point men. Tell you what, in a battle, you don't want to be the point man because you're the first one killed.
Like the corpsman.
Pardon?
Like the corpsman with the red cross on his.
Yeah, a corpsman was in trouble, a machine gunner was in trouble, but the guy who was point man, he was the guy that the enemy saw first. And he was the one that was taken out first. So they volunteered to be the point men. in the battle that Joshua led to tame the promised land west of the Jordan. So they did a little more than what the rest of them did, because I think they acknowledged the fact that they had selfish intentions to begin with, and they wanted to block them out with something that was good. Kroener's opinion, I'm sorry, but that's what I think. I would like to do a little bit, something just a little bit different here. Because you're going to read about occupation and what was supposed to be done. And then we're going to read about the stops that the people of Israel made during the Exodus. And there was 42 of them. Went from here to there, then from there to another there, and from that there to another there. And I can't pronounce the names. I don't remember the names. They're hard to remember. Now I know that God put it in that way for a reason. I think he put it in there so that someone would go through and look up the names in the rest of the Torah and find out what happened there and make a list of it. And I have a list of it at home somewhere, but I couldn't find it. My way of looking at history is this. I would much rather know what happened than where it happened. But I understand the idea of knowing where something is and what happened there is important because it keeps everything in order. My recollection of the Exodus is a little jumpy at times. I get things misplaced and out of order. But I would like to read something, the kind of history that I like to listen to and like to read. Is that okay? There was a messenger sent for somebody to the children of Ammon, and it said this: Israel did not take away the land of Moab or the land of the children of Ammon. For from departing from Egypt, Israel traveled through the wilderness to the Sea of Reeds, and then to Kadesh. Then Israel sent messengers to the king of Edom, saying, Please let me pass through your land. But the king of Edom would not consent. Similarly, he sent word to the king of Moab, but he would not consent. So Israel, after staying at Kadesh, traveled through the wilderness around the land of Edom and the land of Moab, and came to the east side of the land of Moab, and there they camped on the other side of the Arnon. But they did not enter the territory of Moab, for the Arnon was the border of Moab. Then Israel sent messengers to the king of Sihon, to the Ammonites, the king of Heshbon, and Israel said to him, Please let us pass through your land to my place. So Sidon did not trust Israel to pass through his territory, so he gathered his troops, camped at Jahaz, and fought against Israel. But Adonai, God of Israel, gave Sihon and his troops into the hands of Israel, and they defeated them. So Israel took possession of all the land of the Amorites and the inhabitants of that country. Thus they possessed all the territory of the Ammonites, from the Arnon as far as Jabbok, and from the wilderness as far as the Jordan. So now Adonai, God of Israel, dispossessed the Amorites from before his people, Israel. So should you possess their land? Don't you possess that, Chemosh, your God gives you to possess, likewise, okay, be nice. Adonai, our God, dispossessed from before us, thus we will possess. Besides, are you any better than Balak, son of Zippor, the king of Moab? Did he ever strive against Israel, or did he ever fight against them? While Israel was living in Heshbon and its image villages, in Aor and its villages, and all the cities on both sides of the Arnon for 300 years, why didn't you try to recover them all that time? So I myself have not transgressed against you, but you are doing the harm by wagering war against me. May Adonai, the judge, judge today between the children of Israel and the children of Ammon. And the guy said, I'm not going to let you come through. So they prepared for war. Now that's pretty much the story of the land that Reuben and Gad wanted to possess for their cattle. That's the story of how it happened. This sort of fits in with the first little bit that we read about vows. Because the gentleman who sent this letter to that king, his name was Jephthah. And you and I both know who Jephthah is. And Jephthah was the son of a prostitute. And the sons of Jephthah's father's wife didn't like him and said, you're not ever going to inherit anything from your father's house. So they kicked him out. He went someplace and he became an important man and a mighty warrior. The sons of the wife came to him and asked him to fight for them because the Ammonites were against them. So he asked about becoming their leader. And eventually he became their leader. In other words, he got something from the house of his father that they didn't want to allow him to have. That vow that they made about you'll never inherit from your father's house, which didn't stand. God chose to cause it not to stand. And we also know the rest of the story. Jephthah made a vow, a very foolish vow. And I'm going to ask a couple of questions about that vow. We know what he was said. He was going to dedicate his daughter to the Lord. His daughter was his only child. Wasn't she that opened the womb of her mother? Wasn't she the firstborn? Didn't she belong to God already as firstborn? We know that when we talk about the firstborn, we always think about the firstborn male. In fact, there's Torah about the firstborn male of a unloved wife and a loved wife and who got to inherit. But we don't hear much about the firstborn female. But it talks about the firstborn animal, male or female. And they're both firstborn. They both belong to God. And both of them, if they're unblemished, can be offered as korban in the temple. So Jephthah's daughter, whose name I don't know, was already dedicated to the Lord. She was his. She was firstborn. Another question. we read in Torah that the firstborn can be redeemed. Couldn't she have been redeemed? I don't know. But it's just a thought. But the interesting part of this is not the fact that Jephthah made a vow that was foolish. I think the beautiful part of this is what the daughter did. And I say, shades of Isaac. She was a better example than Isaac with respect to obeying her father, I think. A much better example. Isaac did what his father wanted because he loved his father and he trusted his father. Jephthah's daughter, listen to what she did. Jephthah comes home, and the first thing out of his house is his daughter. And he says this, "Alas, my daughter, you have made me bow down in grief." I don't think his daughter did that. I think he did it to himself. All she did was come out of the house. "You've made me miserable, for I have opened my mouth to Adonai, and I cannot take it back." So he understood the vow. He understood the position he was in. But like a man, he blamed it on his daughter that he was upset because she came out of the house. Here's what she said, "My father, you have opened your mouth to Adonai. Do to me that proceeded from your mouth, since Adonai brought vengeance on your enemies, the children of Ammon." In other words, Father, you've got to do it to me. You've got to carry out your vow. Further, she said, "Let this thing be done to me. Let me be alone 2 months so that I may go to the mountain and mourn my virginity, I and my companions." And she went away for 2 months and she came back. Here she is. She's telling her father that he doesn't dare break his vow. So when we read about a father being in charge of the validity of a vow for his daughter or his wife, here's a daughter telling her father that he better maintain the validity of his vow. An interesting example of, I don't even know what word to use there. The thought that comes to mind on this one is, think of Yeshua in the garden. And what 3 words he said while his disciples slept. "Not my will, but thy will be done." Just a thought that here is a daughter, unnamed, that loved her father so much that she caused him to carry out his vow concerning her. We never know what her name is, and I don't think it's ever referred to again anywhere in the Bible. An interesting example of belief in God. I couldn't think of a better one. So, when it comes to vows, I guess this is Kroener's sermon, I don't know. When it comes to vows, I can think back of times when I told my son or my daughter that we would do something and it didn't happen. That was a vow. I don't know how badly they got hurt when that happened. I think that I've heard some foxhole prayers in my life. I don't know whether they were ever completed, fulfilled, or whatever. Some of them possibly, some of them not. But such things like, oh, I'll be over this afternoon to help you do something, and you don't go, you've broken a vow. And what does God think about breaking vows? I think he looks upon those as a sin as bad as anything else, because you're hurting somebody else. And you're taking away your testimony, because after you vow to do something and don't, your testimony isn't worth as much as it was before you made the vow. What did Jesus say about vows? Say that again.
Yes or no?
Let your
Yes
yes
be yes and
And
no
let your
be
yes
Let your yes be yes and your no be no. And why would anyone make a vow? Because you can't grow an inch, you can't keep a hair on your head, and you don't own the throne, and you don't own the footstool, and you don't own Jerusalem. So a vow is something that you need to be very careful about.
The example that Jeremiah speaks of in the first chapter is the Almighty watches over his word to perform it, to make sure that it's performed. And we should have that.
Oh, when you're speaking like that, yes, that's true. That book that you have, how many vows are in that book? How many vows did God make? We call them covenants, but they're vows. And he is not a man who would break his word. And he'll say, haven't I said it and done it? Where is it in Amos where he says something about, if I make trouble in the city, haven't I done it? I do what I say. He's not like a man like you and I, and we don't always tell the truth. And a vow seems to be a time when truth is failing sometimes. And just a statement of doing something, that's almost a vow. Excuse me.
But God has relented from things that he has said. From responding to prayer, he has relented. And if only Jephthah had prayed and asked God to forgive him, I mean, why would he have even made such a vow in the first place? It's just abhorrent to me.
Because he was foolish.
Well, yeah, but he had just gone through battles and he's looking, and he said, if I win this battle, I will, whatever comes out of my house. Well, what was he thinking? A dog was gonna come out of his house, a servant was gonna come out of his house, his wife was gonna come out of his house. I don't know, it just makes me mad.
Okay, I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna say something in with reference to that. I'm not entirely sure he lived in a house. It was probably a tent, and who knows what was inside the tent. And even in Yeshua's times, there were animals downstairs in a house, so that the heat from the animals kept the house warm during the winter. So there was a possibility of an animal coming out of the house. The Germans still do it sometimes in Germany. Well, at least they did in 57. In 58 when I was there. They have a barn downstairs, place for animals. So it's entirely possible that an animal could have come out of his house. But we don't see that. We don't live that way. So we don't acknowledge that that's a possibility. I don't think that it.
But isn't that human sacrifice? If he says, I will sacrifice whatever comes out of my house and his daughter, and then isn't that an
That's why I asked the question, couldn't she have been redeemed?
Couldn't she, maybe she had already been redeemed as a firstborn,
But what does the Bible say?
I think she could have been redeemed, that he didn't pass his mind, I guess, or hers, for that matter.
In Judges 11:39, it says this, then at the end of 2 months, she returned to her father, who did with her according to his vow he had made.
So he killed her.
He fulfilled the vow. Well,
He killed
that's what the Bible says.
her. Yeah.
Now, I don't know what his responsibility is after that. I do know that his reign only lasted 6 years. I know that the tribe of Manasseh was upset with him because he didn't invite them to go to war with him, and they fought. I shouldn't have said that because that brings up another thought that really isn't in the thing. But here's the thought. We think about Israel and the 12 tribes. And we know that the 12 tribes had interactions that were not necessarily godly, again and again and again and again. And even today, when we talk about the Middle East, we talk about the people being very tribal. And one of the mistakes that we made over there is the fact that we mixed various tribes and tried to put them into a single state like Iraq. It had at least 4 major tribes combined into one nation, and that still hasn't worked very well. And that part of the world is very tribal. Very tribal. In fact, the Midianites, they were a member of Abram's family, if you will, because they were the 4th son of Keturah, Abram's second wife. So they were part of Abram's family, and they fought against everybody. So it's a case of very tribal. You're not ever going to make nations out of 7 tribes or 3 tribes or 4 tribes. And I suspect, I haven't heard much about it, but I've heard a little bit about the fact that there is some tribal rivalry going on in Israel to this day. So, why tribes? That's the way God made it. That's the way the family was formed. But it's not a good way to govern anything, I believe. And I'm sorry, we have run out of time. And I didn't get anywhere other than the fact that there's, in these readings the last 4 weeks, there have been a lot of women referenced. And some of them are unnamed, and they're worthy of looking at. Because I think they have a story to tell, and they have something to say about God and His love. And here's one more thing that I would like to say with respect to Jephthah's daughter. given that the Bible says that he did what was necessary, consider this, that when they made an offering to the Lord, that they humanely slaughtered it first before they burnt it. So it's not like burning a person alive. They kosher killing, if you want to put it that way, so that it is as painless as possible and as quick as possible. Even Abram took a knife and was going to do it to his son Isaac. And if you want, they say, I don't know, I don't even know who they are. They say that the most painless way to die is to be beheaded. So, Jonathan, would you close us today, please?